Startup culture has permeated the world of entrepreneurship and business. For better or for worse, the world has become obsessed with prospecting for the billion-dollar ideas that have yet to be, and the never-before-seen solutions that are so simple you swear you could have thought of it yourself. Regardless of my own opinions on the Jeff Bezoses and Elon Musks of the world, one need only to look at the reverence and mythos surrounding America's favorite billionaire moguls to see just how much value we place on the idea of the startup. This reverence for the startup, however, touches on much deeper questions. Why don't we see solutions, even seemingly very obvious ones, sooner? What gives someone the insight or foresight to see an answer where others either see nothing or an insurmountable issue? Enter Peter Thiel in his book 0 to 1, Notes on Startups and How to Build the Future. For those who don't know, Thiel is the co-founder of two billion-dollar businesses whose names you might recognize. PayPal, a company that needs no introduction, and Palantir, a big data analytics company whose software has been used famously and infamously by such organizations as the U.S. Department of Defense for counterterrorism purposes and the British National Health Service in their COVID-19 response. In short, Thiel, whose coterie of close friends include the renowned alien enthusiast Elon Musk, is uniquely suited to penning and promoting a book which claims to analyze the factors and approaches that go into identifying an opening for and successfully launching the next big thing. But Thiel is not the only star of today's show. Eliezer Yudkowsky is the slightly less famous and slightly less wealthy author of Inadequate Equilibria, a book that breaks down and analyzes the efficient markets hypothesis to understand why inefficiencies and inadequacies may persist even within an economic equilibrium. Together, Thiel and Yudkowsky's books offer insight into why the world persists in being so stubbornly suboptimal, and what we can do to perhaps make it slightly more optimal. The efficient markets hypothesis is essentially the idea that the current prices of the market, specifically the major stock markets, are the most efficient estimation of their actual value. This is in large part because no individual, no matter their level of expertise, is able to synthesize the sheer amount of information that informs that price as accurately or efficiently as the aggregate force of the market. A sloppy extrapolation of the efficient markets hypothesis can be taken to suggest that if something is worth doing or can be done efficiently, then it likely has already been done. If the market knows best, then the chances of any one person knowing better is very unlikely. Of course, this idea is the very mindset that people like Thiel and Yudkowsky reject. A quick observation of much of the world will show that while there is a not insignificant level of truth to the efficient markets hypothesis, that extrapolation is far from universally true. There are plenty of instances where someone or some people have identified and found solutions to problems that were overlooked for a very long time. For a startup founder and entrepreneur like Thiel, the very essence of his craft is based on the premise that individuals can and will find a better way to approach problems that a considerable amount of other people have not. Thiel describes this process as secret finding. Secrets, as described by Thiel, are the things about the world that have yet to be discovered and subsequently harnessed into a successful and profitable business venture. As an example of the existence of secrets and the benefits that come from discovering them, Thiel describes how Andrew Wiles proved Fermat's last theorem in 1995. 358 years before, in 1637, the French mathematician Pierre de Fermat died without providing proof for his hypothesis that no integers a, b, and c could satisfy the equation a to the power of n plus b to the power of n equals c to the power of n for any integer n being greater than 2. Thiel points out that most anyone else would have given up on finding or believing in a solution, since the world's greatest minds had quite literally gone centuries without finding one. Thiel also extends his description of secrets to include the spare capacity of our institutions and processes that is not yet being utilized. Think spare bedrooms that can now be made into capital-producing Airbnbs, or the otherwise idle cars that now double as Uber rides for paying passengers. Discovering secrets, as defined by Thiel, has a lot to do with individual perspective and focus. When some person with a combination of smarts, imagination, or expertise comes along at the right place and time, they are able to see an opportunity or a solution that had, until that moment, gone unperceived by the rest of the world. Yudkowsky would argue that while there are perhaps secrets, the big society-altering secrets with trillion-dollar implications are unlikely to be secrets, at least not in the way that Thiel would describe them. Both acknowledge that there are ways in which society is inefficient and fails to capitalize upon its resources to create a more efficient and effective society. However, whereas Thiel focuses on how to create products and services to fill those cracks, Yudkowsky focuses on the structural factors that allow those cracks to perpetuate themselves in the first place. Thiel's secrets are solutions to what Yudkowsky would describe as suboptimal Nash equilibriums. If Thiel is talking about how to break from an inefficient and inferior system, then Yudkowsky is talking about why people don't break from the system. As Yudkowsky puts it in his taxonomy of failure, suboptimal Nash equilibriums are when people are aware of the failings and inadequacies of a certain system, yet it remains stable because it is the logical course of action for all the individuals participating in the system to perpetuate it. Yudkowsky offers up the example of the American medical system, as well as the college system. He argues that even though it would likely be more beneficial for everyone if doctors were trained in a specialization with less time and costs than current medical school training, that does not occur because it would require a collected, coordinated effort to validate the change. Individuals lack the ability and momentum to instigate such a change by themselves, so it makes more sense for them to continue with the current system of medical doctor training, even though it is extremely labor and time intensive. As a result, no matter how aware people are that a system is broken and seriously flawed, they will continue with the current path. This is a key difference between Thiel and Yudkowsky. For Yudkowsky, inadequacies persist not because people are unaware of better approaches or they're unable to discover secrets. To the contrary, they are just as aware and capable as anyone of identifying where and how things should change. However, larger structural pressures disincentivize them to act differently and push for that change. The individual logical course of action, then, is to instead take part in a flawed yet stable system, no matter how illogical the problems are for collective society. In essence, convention pushes us to focus on the wrong problems. Thiel also addresses the prevailing lack of incentives to begin a startup and found your own business. Not just beginning a startup, but spending the time and resources on developing a truly original and paradigm-shifting idea. Thiel's analysis of how to be successful in creating a business fits neatly within Yudkowsky's description of inadequate equilibria and suboptimal Nash equilibrium. Thiel specifically addresses the incentives of academia and higher education as an example of how people are pushed onto a path because of predetermined norms and not necessarily because the path is the most adequate for a person's skills or goals or advancing the future. Just as Yudkowsky says that people tend to fixate on the problems of a flawed system and not the flawed system itself, Thiel describes how young people are pushed to succeed within the realm of academics without necessarily evaluating the relevance of academia to their goals. While it may make sense for a smart person to pursue the generally accepted accolades and markers of intelligence, like diplomas, awards, and a high-status trade, it would be a mistake for them to assume that an alternate path may not hold as much, if not more, of a payoff for them in the end. Confidence is central to both Yudkowsky and Thiel's books. An individual's tendency to underconfidence or overconfidence goes a long way to determining whether or not they're qualified to question something or identify a solution. Yudkowsky believes that, despite the greater tendency to warn against overconfidence, people are generally underconfident. As a result, people are more likely not to take the necessary steps to confront the conventions and authorities that are holding a flawed system in place. In other words, modesty is necessary and useful, but people tend to overestimate how modest they ought to be. Modesty is an issue that Thiel also identifies in his discussion of secrets. If identifying and capitalizing on good secrets is integral to the development of a good business, then a lack of confidence prevents someone from trusting that the secret is worth pursuing or correct, because it has not been verified from other experts or trusted sources. When something is uncharted territory, it takes a fine balance of confidence and modesty to keep moving forward purposefully without external validation. Being overly modest also takes us back to our discussion of why people choose to pursue pursuits that make them look desirable according to preset norms. Thiel describes it as people hedging their bets by accumulating a list of accomplishments and skills that look good to a potential employer. Instead of charting an independent path that may or may not come to fruition, it is generally safer to defer to the expertise and expectations of outsiders to pursue a more certain path to success. Thiel addresses a similar phenomenon of over-reliance on convention with his discussion of something he calls the founder's paradox in business. As we already talked about earlier, a lot of our conception of a great business and idea hinges on the stalwart and knowing individual. Icons are especially attractive to the job of myth-making when we try to account for the success of a business after all uncertainty about a business's pivotal moments are past. Thiel perceptively points out that there's an interest in knowing what about an individual's characteristics make for success. Breaking down the factors personal to, say, Steve Jobs or Bill Gates that made them successful is generally easier and more interesting than trying to do a Bayesian-style analysis of all the other elements around them that also contributed to their success. Thiel notes that their eccentricities and charisma are an integral part of their businesses and drives the creativity, momentum, and vision that allows a business to be highly successful. But they are not the business, and allowing the founder to eclipse everything else can easily be fatal. Once again, a focus on the wrong thing precludes further progress for everyone. So if success can't be chalked up to certain characteristics, but it also can't be reliably predicted by conventional wisdom and popular ongoing trends, what can? When it comes to success and progress, there are so many factors at play, it seems like it's hard to figure out who and what will make a successful combination. If we were to listen to Thiel and Yudkowsky, it would kind of seem like we're on our own. So it's obviously not that simple. Both Thiel and Yudkowsky offer interesting and useful frameworks for thinking about how to approach problems and judging your own ability to solve them. However, ultimately, both lead us to the conclusion that you have to evaluate each situation for yourself. The rule is that there is no rule. As with everything, it depends. No matter how much advice or how many rules, experts, and laws people like Thiel and Yudkowsky are able to lay out, people must be adaptable and willing to take risks in order to succeed for themselves and others. The wisdom of crowds and modestly deferring to those who likely know better certainly have a place. However, major solutions and paradigm shifts necessarily deviate from the previous conventions and wisdoms. Just because they eschew what experts believe to be true does not mean that they're wrong. The key is knowing when it is or when it isn't. Clearly, there are plenty of instances where we necessarily rely on others to guide us to the best methods or solutions. No one person can reliably be trusted to know better than everyone who came before them. Yet, evaluating your situation independently within the context of what others believe and know is necessary to keep progressing forward. Just as with the efficient markets hypothesis, there's a sloppy extrapolation to Thiel and Yudkowsky's argument. An insane, delusional person who will take their words to press forward with a terrible idea against all better rational judgment. Yet, something tells me that type of personality wouldn't need much more convincing otherwise. No matter, Thiel and Yudkowsky's works are fundamentally optimistic. Despite the world's shortcomings and many inadequacies, we can and will find solutions that make it better. More than that, both authors encourage readers to bet on themselves. Conventions are useful to a point, but it is well within the realm of possibility to discover and achieve great things that have never been done before. The worst that someone can do is to simply not try at all.